Hi, my name is Maggie Lucy. I'm the Director of Photography, and this is my capstone presentation. Over the past year, I crafted cinematography on 2 projects, a study on the monstrous feminine and Rumble. And I also shot and DP'd Candlestick. Each project brought a unique visual style that allowed me to explore movement, lighting, and interesting compositions. I'm excited to tell you about my process. A Study on the Monstrous Feminine is an experimental horror film that explores the evolution of feminine power told in 4 acts. My goal was to maintain clear cinematic style to the narrative arc while allowing each part to feel unique and visually expressive. A lot went into pre-production for Mon Femme. Meg just took a really collaborative approach with it, where I was just able to bring any crazy idea I wanted to talk about. It was just on the table, which was really exciting and fun. I wanted the cinematography for the opening of the film to be powerful immediately. Using long takes and slow, intentional camera moves, you really are transported with the action on screen. So you have to sit in moments for longer and really watch as they unfold. I approached shooting the void almost like shooting a green screen. So we kind of blasted white light on the background that really emphasized the sterile and uncomfortableness that is the birth scene. We shot everything on the Arri Alexa Mini. We used the Sigmas, and then we utilized the SR3 lens to create a vignette to really draw the eye into the frame. We had tried a camera test way earlier, and we determined a lot about white balance and just the vibe and look that we were going for, and how I wanted to expose Meg versus the background. I wanted to use high key lighting, but also maintaining separation of the subject. We used DMX lighting as well to program the rip, and that was an interesting shing moment that really pushes the film forward. So it's a slow opening, and then the film just moves forward from that. Transformation transports you right in the scene with the characters. The camera's shaky and it follows their movements. You're experiencing what they're going through with them. The color in Transformation is almost a sickly orange and a grungy green, and it kind of feels way more saturated than Birth, where it's just white. You're placed more with the characters compared to a more voyeuristic view from Birth. Transformation makes you experience and feel what they're feeling in a more intimate way. A lot of this we used handheld, easy rig, and kind of just wanted to be with the characters for these moments. My overall goal for the scene, Destruction, was to create a dreamy and unsettling feeling. I really matched the shots in my mood board to what I created, and I was able to create a distinct look of Destruction. You think Mon Femme, you think Destruction. I embraced more of the red lighting, and I used the white walls of the refinery to my advantage. And we lit that with 2 S60s up at the walls. Red light was bouncing around the room. And then I had an Amaran light mat overhead to create a golden silhouette hue, and it really popped the color. I also custom built a filter with like sheer skin-colored tights and an embroidery loop that we mounted to the top of the camera. And you can really see this in the girl's performance on stage. There's almost like a glowiness around her highlight. For the shots of the man, I used the Dana dolly that creates slow, controlled movements that juxtaposes the erratic shots of the girl. Destruction also includes the only shot of a man in the entire film, and I think we wanted to almost not show his face, and like he's unimportant, and I think using the Atlas Orions kind of emphasized that with like almost blocking his face out with like lens flares, and using the anamorphics kind of creates a distance in like the focal depth that really illustrates that almost unimportance and almost like distaste for him. Castration scene, we completely shot completely differently. Originally it was a shadow on the wall, but in this case I decided to shoot through a silk, so we had the silk in front of the screen, the characters, and then an L10 behind them with a one bulb light to create that really intentional spotlight. It almost follows suit of Birth with a natural vignetting of that scene. There's like a congruency through the film, is the circular framing in the middle. Having real intimacy and more like visceral moments really like cause you to like, you have to watch this, and like if you're uncomfortable, good. The shots of like the lollipop and the lipstick and just watching the guts like being ripped out of someone is like a very visceral and intense moment, and capturing that in a way that literally you have to watch this. You can't look away. Hauntingly seductive. Satisfaction was filmed on the virtual production wall. It was my second time working with VP, and I used the backdrop as almost a digital matte painting. I lit the space evenly to integrate the background to create a natural look. We intercut with vintage SR3 lenses to soften the image and create a natural vignette. It gave the scene a quiet, surreal quality. Virtual production is like a very unique process. I would say it's different than shooting something on a green screen or just shooting on location. You have to take into account like the pixels, the moire, things that happen like with the wall, and then also the transition of like the wall and the environment is something that you have to think about in terms of set dressing, but also specifically for cinematography because of depth of field and also how your camera moves plays with the wall. So we decided to go with like a matte painting approach where it kind of like static image, and that was our environment that we created. And I think that it was pretty successful, and that was like the vibe that we wanted. One of our major inspirations was the Dior Spring Summer campaign of 2022, and that was shot on like an actual matte painting, but like the atmosphere and the vibe of that was our basically visual inspiration. Rumble is a character-driven drama that explores grief, memory, and girlhood through a gritty, stylized lens. It has a strong emotional core, and I approach the cinematography with that in mind. My overall cinematography goals for Rumble was to have film noir-inspired visuals, low-key lighting with high contrast, and pops in the color palette. I wanted the lighting to feel like naturalistic yet stylized. My approach was generally to use a strong visual style that illustrated heightened emotions and the emotional state of the characters, utilizing dynamic camera movements and like color that emphasized what emotion each character was feeling. I utilized a lot of strong, prominent close-ups in Rumble to just emphasize on the emotion that the characters were in. It creates like detail and nuance, like focusing on the character's face and allowing to like see their subtle expressions. Bumps between the wide shots and extreme close-ups was like very important to our visual language. As the characters move through the space, they really move through emotions, and it visually plays out on their face as well as with the lighting. So Rumble was shot at the Refinery, and that's such a beautiful location. It fit our vibe so well. And just utilizing that space for its advantages was like a major approach in my cinematography. Having like this big room that the majority of the film takes place in was a challenge to light, and it was just interesting how we kind of pulled that together. I think the white room of the refinery brought a lot of lighting challenges, as light would just bounce around the room, white ceilings, white walls. And we had to do a lot of set dressing to like combat that. One of like the technical aspects that I really liked about Rumble was the use of like the menace arm, and that was how we basically rigged lights overhead. We had 3 of those in the space, and those helped to motivate like power and emotional state. So as the characters would walk through the space, their lighting would literally change as they walked through the space. So they would walk from like a blue shadow into a golden hue, and that would demonstrate like the fall of like out of the rumble. The build that we had was a Canon C300. We used the Sigma lenses, and the reason I chose those was because I wanted to be less sharp than the Zeiss, but still soft and like realistic to the human eye. We switched to the Atlas Mercury lenses for the flashbacks. Their subtle center draw and softness creates an airy, reflective quality that really helps distinguish memory from the present. Candlestick was a whimsical, surreal, fantastical comedy about a wax figure coming to life and finding a purpose through badminton. We leaned into naturalistic lighting early on, but after the transformation, I introduced the Atlas Orion anamorphic lenses for a more stylized movement to signal a shift in tone. The 25mm lens was a perfect fit as it created distortion and fisheye effect that really heightened the characters' faces and the absurdity of the film. We shot the intro sequence on the Cook primes and contrasted with black duvetine and overhead sky panels to create an opening scene of surrealism and warmth throughout that highlighted the memory. Thank you for watching. To close out this presentation, I wanted to include a reel of all my work that I've done over the course of these past 4 years at RIT.
I had to lay a little off, yeah, I had to cut a bill off, yeah, but if we been real though, yeah, nah, I don't never feel nothing. Outside of jumping the gun, yeah, like I do it for fun. You act like you do it for real, but no, you not want the vibes, you never could come. Inside of this building we run, inside of this world we run, we do it for us. No, I'll fuck with one of them at all, won't fuck you at all. No, I won't pick it because I don't like it at all. I can't want to see you fall. I keep on chasing the highs, I know I can never get back, so I'm always on low. And I got eyes on the back of my head, I got eyes everywhere, so I know where you go. I could drop ties in this bitch, drop like flies in this bitch. I cut ties in this bitch, I'll cut ties in your face. Yeah, cut you like a lace. Nothing I do could be replaced. That's why I'm living out in space. I take the money to another level. I take the plane to another level. I take the highest to a new level. I take it high to a new level. Keep digging your grab past you to show. Yeah, I ain't mean to burst your bubble, but I ain't into making change. I'ma stay the same. Bring it to my level. If we be real, I don't know how to feel. I've been overseas, you've been on your knees. No, you begging please. It's nothing left to see, nothing left to feel. Why you in the field? Why you so real? Tell me how you feel. Why you make me feel the way I feel? Will you make me feel better? Always clash your heads, yeah, when somebody think they know better. Who the fuck is you? Got better things to do. I don't got time to waste, I just need my space. It's a couple things that I can't feel, but I can't feel my face. It's a couple things that I wish I could, but I can't replace. I think it's a sickness, being so selfish, yeah. I'm in need of a witness. They always tell me, never forget this. I forget everything.